Fabi just sold his body to get this punch. We're going to get started really shortly here, guys. I just want to make sure I'm caught up on the chat. Schwobe's in the house. What's up, Schwobe? Will Wolf and Chess Nerdbird having a convo. Bertrand, I'm liking your layout. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, this is my World Championship collage. World champions and top players of their era, going back to, I've even got a picture up here of Morphe, a picture up here of a drawing of Philidor. Here's another bust of Philidor. Percy thought that was George Washington, but you might have thought it was like Bach or Beethoven, but it's Philidor. And you might notice that a lot of these pictures, here's a picture of Boris Spassky wearing a wreath, Carlsen, Anand. You might recognize that. Here's another one with a wreath. World champions classically get crowned with a wreath and a sash. Sort of like how, the guy who wins the Indy 500 pours milk all over his face, or like, you know what I mean? Like the guy who wins the Stanley Cup drinks champagne out of the cup, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Every sport has its customs. Well, in chess, it's a custom that you crown the world champion with a wreath. So anyways, that's my little background there for the next couple of weeks. Ray Twitch says, keep talking more, Bertrand, about the psychology of these games historically. Please and thank you. Yeah, we're going to get into some of that kind of stuff. So let's get a few moves into this game, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the third World Chess Championship. We've already gone over a couple in our last few days here. We've talked about Wilhelm Steinitz, the first official World Chess Champion. And there you can see him on the right in both of those double pictures. And up in the top left-hand corner, Wilhelm Steinitz, one of the early scientists of chess. He brought a lot to the classical school of chess and sort of brought us up into the modern era and the possibilities of hypermodernism. Although he was an extremely staunch classical player, almost to the point of being an asshole about it. And then we have Emanuel Lasker, a mathematician, a PhD, a philosopher, extremely well-renowned in a number of different fields. His brother taught him chess when he was about 10 years old, when he went to study mathematics in Germany. He became the world chess champion, beating Steinitz, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. Steinitz was 58 at the time, so clearly not in his prime. But Lasker did hold that world chess championship for an astonishing 27 years. That's right, 27 years. Through many different world championship matches. He remained the number one player in the world. Chess Nerdbird says, gotta go, leaving work now. Have a good stream. Thank you, Chess Nerdbird. Appreciate you hanging around, man. Thanks so much for dropping by. Chess Nerdbird, guys. If we have a mod out there that can give Chess Nerdbird a shout out command, that would be really cool. If not, I'll do that on my free time. But yeah, I really appreciate you stopping by, and I really enjoyed your stream last night, Chess Nerdbird. Hippo Defense is in the house. What's up? Hey, Alexandria Princess is here, man. I know. You can see some white in there, Alexandria. I was gonna shave today, but I just didn't have time. I was making my collage. I was making my World Championship collage in the background there. Okay, enough is enough. It's time to get some moves into this game, guys. I mean, I'm kind of procrastinating because this is such a boring game. So C4 was played by Magnus Carlsen. You might remember last time that he played D4. And in that game, knight F6 was played, followed by knight F3 and D5. We got ourselves into a Queen's Gambit decline, where Fabi was extremely well prepared and was never in any danger of any kind whatsoever. Here we have an English defense. A perfectly strong opening. It often transposes into queen pawn opening. It can transpose into a lot of different things. A King's Indian attack, all kinds of stuff. It can be an open or a closed game, so it's a very flexible opening. It has a drawish reputation, but it really kind of depends on the player and how they choose to play it. E5 is one of the different possibilities. I personally like to play in this position E6, and after, for example, knight to F3, D5, and knight to F6 at some point in time, and just immediately challenge that C-pawn. That's how I like to play this. So E5 is one possibility. Another possibility is a symmetrical English with C5, and you're just going to both copy each other's moves for a little while and get a very stodgy central occupation style classical game. Even though C4 is really not that classical of a game, because you're using an outside pawn to try to attack a central square, which is the purpose of C4, to try to exchange an outside pawn for a center pawn and open up the C file for later operations. So C4, E5, knight to C3, knight F6, knight F3, knight to C6, so very much like a symmetrical, only I've noticed that Fabi likes to put his knight in front of the pawn. Fabi likes to have very deep bases for his pawn chain. So for those of you who are kind of new at chess, classically the correct way that you want to attack a pawn chain, which is a situation like, let's say if there was a pawn here on d6, so you would have c6, d6, and e6, or an e5, c7, d6, and e5, all having pawns. That's called a pawn chain. A lot of these terms were either proffered or propagated by Hans Kamak. If you ever get a chance, read the book Pawn Power in Chess. It's a brilliant, brilliant book. It's available now in algebraic notation, one of the definitive books on pawn structures. So anytime you find yourself with a pawn chain like that, it's always very difficult to attack the front of the pawn chain. The front of the pawn chain, although it's closer to your position, is also the pawn that's the strongest because it's more easy to defend. It's defended by another pawn, right? And even the middle of the pawn chain, although it's a little bit deeper, again, it's defended by a pawn. So actually the way to attack a pawn chain, if you're able to, is to attack the base of the pawn chain, the furthest pawn back. The reason for that is because that's the pawn that's not guarded by any other pawns. So that pawn can only be defended by pieces, and if that pawn falls, then the pawn in front of it, in this case the d6 pawn, had the pawn been there, that pawn would then be the most vulnerable pawn and would now no longer be protectable by other pawns. You want to use pawns to protect your pawns. You don't want to use your pieces for that. Pieces are supposed to be used for attack. That's why they're able to move long range. It's a waste of a piece to be stuck down defending pawns. Sometimes you have no choice, but that's not a good situation to be in. Quinn is in the house. What's up? Perpetual Stalemate. How you doing, man? Wow, yeah, everybody's in here. Thank you guys for joining me on the Trout Show. Little analysis of Game 4 from the World Chess Championship. So I have noticed that Fabi does like to leave the base of his pawn chain behind his knights and keep it well protected and keep it deep for a long time. So it's very difficult for white to hit the base of his pawn chain. So G3, in this case, he's not even going to get that pawn chain because white doesn't play aggressively. White is clearly just playing a very safe position here right now. And so black is going to take this opportunity to play d5. Probably this is superior to having the pawn on e6, which is the style that I like, because the pawn on e6 blocks the bishop. I'm not really worried about that at this point in time, but it is something that you have to consider when you're playing the black pieces. You don't want to get yourself too cramped, and Fabi has found a more aggressive way to play this. So pawn takes, knight takes. So white has succeeded in his goal. He's exchanged a side pawn for a center pawn. So now white will have 2 versus 1 pawns in the center of the board, and he hopes someday to take advantage of that, to use those pawns to bully black around in the center. Are you guys seeing me okay? Are you having any lag out there? Because I had the computer on. If there's no lag, that's good to know. Then that means I can leave the computer on if I have to. We are all 5 because nobody is doing any review of this game. It is absurd, so much content here. Bertrand stretches review things at 3 hours. Oh, thanks, VeriTwitch. I'm surprised that more people aren't looking at it. Probably they're pissed off because it was so drawish. But that's how life goes, guys. It's top-level chess. These are the best players in the world. What did you expect? Did you think that people were going to make grotesque blunders and there was going to be queen sacks all over the place? That doesn't usually happen at the top level. Unless you're a Fischer or a Kasparov type. And when you review those Kasparov games, you'll find a lot of errors. You'll find a lot of errors by today's standards. That's why the style of chess has changed. You can't get away with those kind of things anymore. And we have computers, so the person can always go home afterwards, look it up on a computer. So even if you get away with that once, you won't get away with it twice. And if anyone in the world ever at a top level plays a line that gets busted by the computer, then all of these masters get to look it up, take it home to their computer, find the solution, and now they just know it. So it's not like it was back in the Kasparov or the Fischer days. It's a very different era of chess. And so you can expect to see more of these types of games. Now the real question is, for me, as I grab my coffee, has Carlsen decided that he is comfortable to just keep on drawing? Has Carlsen decided he doesn't need to be aggressive because he's never been in any danger? We're 4 games into the World Chess Championship, and still there is no danger of any kind whatsoever. He has never been in danger for one single move. Percy says I play the French. The c8 bishop is basically a shepherd. Yeah, and also Percy, another one that's like that is the Dutch. I'm teaching a friend the Dutch Stonewall, and the Dutch Stonewall makes the French bishop look like a real act of peace. I mean, it's even worse in the Dutch Stonewall. But that's okay. You can have a bishop like that sometimes. It's not the end of the world. and that bishop can be unleashed later. Same thing when you play a fianchetto on the king side in a King's Indian or a Perk or something. A lot of times black has to, put a pawn on e5, and then later on you can try to unleash your bishop at a later point in time. So that's not the end of the world. Those pieces aren't necessarily defending the pawns. They just happen to be trapped behind the pawns. So they'll do what they can defensively while they're back there. But that's not really their main goal. Your pawns are more or less kind of safe back there. So the bishop you don't need the bishop to protect your pawns in those situations. You're just trying to find a way to unlock it. Woolworth says reverse accelerated dragon. It's a Catalan. It's a type of Catalan or in English. Let's have a 1 minute bullet arena. Vertwitch wants a 1 minute bullet. Hey, we'll see, man. Maybe. Scan Bertrout into a 1 minute game. Well, 1 minute is better than a 30-second game, Wolf. No lag. Great. Thanks for telling me that, guys. Really happy to hear that. Fantastic. I got this expensive new high-speed internet connection, and it's not as fast. It's 1/3 as fast of the upload speed is what it's supposed to be. Or download speed, I should say, but the upload speed is very, very good. Very good. I have 0 dropped frames. I've never had any dropped frames since I got this new internet, so it should be good, man. It should be very, very good. Thank you, guys. I think Carlsen doesn't mind winning a game, but he's probably knows Fabi sucks in quick time controls, so it's fine with draw. Yeah, if he can play the get to the fast time controls, he'll be happy. We're a long ways away from that, guys. There's still 8 more games. This is where the pressure is just starting. It's only just now starting to get into more critical games. Plenty of chess left to be played. Does the world champion Magnus Carlsen now have 5 games left as white? I know that halfway through the match, after 6 games, so Carlsen started with black and Fabi had white. So it goes, Carlsen is black, white, black, white, black, white. And then in the 7th game, they switch it. So the 6th and 7th game, Magnus is going to be white. So the 7th game, Magnus is white, then black, white, black, white, and black. So he starts and finishes the match with the black pieces. But in the middle, as compensation, he gets 2 whites in a row. So that's going to be a very interesting dynamic. What does he choose to do with those 2 whites? And he knows that those games are coming up. So he may be waiting for that moment to try to strike. I was wondering if his and his team's plan is to force draws since he knows he's vastly superior. I mean, that's part of it, Quinn, but I think it's more along the lines of, I think what he's trying to do is say to Fabi, you can't beat me if I don't get aggressive with you. If I don't play aggressively and I just play drawish chess, how are you going to beat me? He doesn't have the style to do that. So he's trying to force, I think, Fabi and his team of seconds to make a decision. Are we going to play more aggressively? Are we going to try to take this to Carlsen? Because if we don't, and Carlsen doesn't get aggressive, how can you counterpunch? How can you use your defensive wizardry to counterpunch and take advantage of your opponent's mistakes when he just never gets aggressive? So I don't really know what his plan is exactly, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Hey, KB, nice to see you, man. At least both light bishops are bad in the Dutch. That's a good point. Catalan, there's a pawn on... Right, Catalan, there's usually a pawn on d4, but the pawn can still go to d4 at some point in time. If you can interview Magnus during this game and ask him 2 questions, what would those questions be? I mean, I would have to think about that, Veritwitch, but I would try to ask him a couple of probing questions to force him to skirt around them. But I would probably ask him something along the lines of, do you think that Fabi's character will allow him to play aggressively and bring the game to him? Something along those lines, just to try to get him to show his hand a little bit. And I would ask him what's more important, that the chess is interesting or that he wins. I would be curious to see his response to that. For streaming, upload is better than download. Okay, so that's good to know then. That's good to know, Counter Cruise, because my upload speed is actually a little faster. There was supposed to be 20 megabytes per second and 300 megabytes per second download, but it's mostly about 100 megabytes download, but it's like 21.7 of upload speed, so it's even faster than what they said. So I'm pretty happy about that. Mic is kind of low. Could I increase the mic's volume? Yeah. The problem with the mic volume is just the mic is far away from me. So if I'm a little bit closer like this, does that help you, Hippo Defense? The problem is I'm kind of leaning in and out, and I've got my mic set so that it doesn't pick up outside sounds. So I'm concerned that if I put my head past the microphone, you're not going to hear me at all. But that's the best I can do, is to try to hold the microphone a little closer to my face as much as I can. I can't do it the whole time, but tell me if that's a little bit better for you right now, Hippo. And then we're going to get into this game again here. Sorry. Caruana not playing adventurous. No, I didn't expect him to. And we took a look at these guys' styles before the games, and they're holding true to what we talked about. Winning is always the most important. I know, and I know that that's what he'll say, and I'm curious to hear. I would love to hear his exact quote on it, on that question. I would love to hear that. Okay. I found the purpose of chess: to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. What is that? Is that some sort of like a quote from 300 or something? Okay, so let's get back into this, guys. I'm going to put my mic down for a second. Let's get a little bit further into this game and see how this one goes. So last move was knight takes d5. So we do have a 2-on-1 majority in the center for white, but it's a closed position. It's a queen-pawn style opening. Bishop to g2, bishop to c5, and castle. I'm a little bit surprised to see this piece formation by Fabi. That's a little bit aggressive. I'm also amazed that he can get a position like this, because, boy, I sure struggle to get these kinds of positions. I mean, I just don't know these positions very well. So I'm sure that if Carlsen tried to do something to prevent these kind of a setup, or be more aggressive in the center with white's uncastled king, I'm sure that Fabi would just beat that attack back very easily. But I sometimes get into trouble here in the center. So I'm a little bit surprised by this piece formation. Castles, but I'm not an expert in these lines. D3, all very safe. Rook to E8, bishop to D2, knight takes, and bishop takes. So you can try to exert a little bit of pressure down the file here. It's the longest file as well. So the bishop's in a great spot. Both bishops are on their longest diagonals of the board for white. So they both have to be kept an eye on. But black's bishops also both have lots of momentum. He has a half-open D file to work with, which seems right now to be a little bit better than the potential power of the C file. So the knight to E5, basically, he's just going to get rid of some power. He's just going to clog this line up. He doesn't want that bishop to get unleashed, and he doesn't want these pawns to start rolling in the center. So B4, this is probably a strong move. Chase that bishop back temporarily. The bishop probably should have gone back to B6, actually. I'm not sure why he didn't play bishop back to B6. I mean, maybe he's concerned about, like, A4 or something. But then just, like, A6. I don't know. It seems to me like, what does the computer say about this position? The computer says absolute dead draw. But it does like bishop to B6 a little bit better. And on playing bishop to D6, it suggests that maybe white is a little bit better. But as per usual, I feel like the computer struggles in closed positions, and it doesn't fully understand this position. I don't really think white has any edge, but that's probably the biggest edge of this entire game that either side had. And here it recommends knight takes knight. On knight takes, pawn takes, if bishop takes, it's recommending bishop takes g3. If bishop takes here, bishop takes, king takes, the queen check first, that's a good move. Throw that in. Boy, I would just take this right away. But the computer finds bishop to h3. Holy cow, I did not see this line, guys. Bishop to h3. Okay, let me see how that went down. I did not see this line, guys. If knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, bishop takes. I see pawn takes instead. Pawn takes instead, and don't give him that chance. I see. And then he just plays queen to d2. Gotcha. Okay. So this is probably still a pretty drawish position. I gotta say, though, that I like this line a little bit better for black, and then he's got this pair of pawns here, so he's got a potential outside pass pawn on the h file. But in exchange, white's going to be able to get some pressure on the c file, Black has the e-file. I don't know. It's a little bit more dynamic. I kind of prefer this line. But maybe I prefer it for black. So, okay, so maybe that's the reason why he chose this bishop to d6, trying to trick white into taking this this knight with the knight or the bishop. Let's see what you guys are saying here. Oh, Conan. A Conan. We were talking about Conan the other day on the Kingly Bingley. Was it Kingly Bingley shows? Or one of these shows, anyways. Talking about how when I was a kid, I accidentally walked in with my dad to the we were going to see Return of the Jedi, 1983. We're going to see Return of the Jedi in the theaters, and we accidentally walked into the wrong theater, and it was Octopussy. It was the opening scene from Octopussy playing. So I got to watch the opening scene of Octopussy in the bed there with the chainsaw or whatever it was going through the back of the bed, and we got to see that live in the theaters. And as we were walking into the theater, there was a life-sized cutout of Conan the Barbarian as we walked into the theater. So all three of those movies were playing at the exact same time. Conan, Return of the Jedi, and Octopussy. Can you believe that? Man, what a glorious era. What a glorious era for movies. That was my little Conan story. Mello would be proud of Magnus, would he? Mic's still kind of low. I can't really fix that too much. I mean, I can turn up the volume here a little bit. I can turn up the volume here a little bit and turn this down a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it's far away. I mean, can I do this? Is this in the way? That's the best really that I can do. I'll give this one a try here, guys. Put the mic right physically on the computer and let me know if this sounds weird or not. Hold on, let me just put the cloth underneath it so it doesn't reverberate. Let me know if that sounds a little bit better. Poker Mage is in the house. What's up, man? Poker Mage is in the house. Birdtrout, you need to go for the throne. Of course, Blazerow would say that. House of Vampires. Mr. Blazerow 8 is in the house. How you doing, sir? A pleasure, a pleasure. Mr. Blazerow in the house. Let's give a couple of shout-outs while we're in here. Let's see who we've all got. Who do we have in the house? We've got Blazerow 8 is in the house. Okay. We've got Schwobi is in the house. Schwobi is in here in lurk mode. Who else we got, guys? Gary Fang's in the house. Whoops, I shouldn't be calling people out. We've got... does Poker Mage still have a command? The Mage is live on the Trout Show. Lock up your women and go all in on double aces. There you go. Okay, so let's see how this game continues on. Bishop to d6. Rook to b1. So he's preparing to take that pawn now. Knight takes and bishop takes. So the knights are off of the board. It's going to be a lot harder now for white to make progress in the center because he's not going to have knights to protect those pawns and make double attacks. A6 takes place. Bertrand, we are outside your window and we can hear you loud and clear. Good gracious. The Vamps have traveled. They travel well. They travel on wings of bat. C6. Okay, here the move played was rook to e1. I think if Magnus Carlsen, here's a psychological point in this game. If Magnus Carlsen wanted to play this game for a win, I believe he would have played the move b5. b5 is a pretty obvious move, I think, to a strong player, even a relatively strong player, you know, like 1600 or something. You should be able to find this move pretty quickly. You're cramping black from playing the b5 move by playing it first. You open up for the potential of the rook and the bishop getting onto the square if necessary, and you're posing problems for black's pieces, so you're giving black a lot of choices to make. However, you're also putting black in defensive mode. For example, the threat of pawn takes, and bishop takes. So you're forcing black to respond to your moves. Now black doesn't have to come up with any plan. Black already knows what the plan is. The plan is rebuff this aggressiveness by white. right? So he doesn't have any choice. He can't be looking over on the king side, figuring out where do I want to put my pawns? How do I get my king into the center in the end game? He's not thinking like that. He's thinking of the immediate problems taking place on his board, because that's what has to be solved right now. I think that this move that Magnus played, rook to e1, signifies to me that he is not trying to win this game. That Magnus has decided that this game is comfortable as a draw, and he just wants to take that, and he's happy. Go home, take his extra draw, come back the next day and try it again. He may be waiting for those 6th and 7th games where he will have back-to-back whites. The only time in the tournament anybody is going to have back-to-back colors. He will have back-to-back whites. Fabi will have back-to-back blacks. He may be waiting for that chance. That may be his time to strike. Having Fabi back on his heels 2 consecutive games, and he can push those games. He can push them to the absolute limit and exhaust Fabi. So he may be trying to take some little draws, easy draws, to try to conserve his energy so that he can get to those games which are just a couple away. If he comes back the next time with black and draws easily, that's going to be game 5. Then boom, he's got probably a rest day, I believe. And then he's got 2 consecutive whites. That is a great chance for Magnus to strike back. It was another draw, Blazer, yes. No problem. Thanks for hanging around so long, Card Counter Chris. Really appreciate that, man. If you guys don't know Card Counter Chris, he's a Magic the Gathering player. I specify Magic the Gathering because some people actually thought he did magic tricks, like pulling, ribbons out of his fingers and stuff like that. Oh, look, there's no coin in my hand. Now there is. So he is a Magic the Gathering card player, but he has a really great stream. It's fun. He has sponsored giveaways and sub contests and things like that sometimes. So very cool guy to go check out, man. Give him a follow, give him some support. All right. So here he plays the move. Black plays the move, bishop to d7. So he's just got an extra piece now, an extra defender on this pawn. So this is no longer a possibility. E3, queen f6. I mean, this would have been a lot more valuable with a knight on the board or a bishop still on this diagonal, but it's not. Bishop to e4, bishop to f5, and queen f3, forcing more exchanges. Let's just see what Mr. Computer says. Tell us, Mr. Silicon, what's the result of this position? Dead stinking draw. Dead stinking draw. Boring. All right? So since we're at this boring point in the game, before we continue on, yeah, these top-level games are becoming boring to me, every game ending in a draw. I mean, calculated, if you don't know the history of chess, that's very normal. There's going to be a lot of draws because you're playing the top-level guys. I mean, they're not going to make the kind of mistakes that allow you to have a lot of, fancy attacks and stuff like that. But the game today was especially boring in that it was clear that both sides were happy to just take the draw. And I don't like that. That part bothers me a little bit. But not all of the games have been boring. The first game was extremely exciting. Extremely, extremely exciting. And there will be more exciting chess to come, don't you worry. We've only had one legitimate theoretical battle so far, so don't worry, folks, it's going to get better. But while we're looking at this boring position, since it was such a boring game today, and I don't mind. I prefer good play. I don't want to see cheapo tactics. Cheapo tactics bother me. If you have a beautiful tactic that's extremely well thought out and original, then that's beautiful. That's the most beautiful thing in chess. But just to deliberately play one move cheapos and stuff, that's stupid. I don't like play like that. I would much rather see play like this than one move cheapos. For my tastes. But that's just me. So while we're doing this anyways, guys, let's take a look as we go through here's my World Championship background. A collage of all the different World Championships. I didn't include the PCA guys. I didn't include the 1998 to 2006 or so knockout FIDE World Champions like Kalifman and Ponomaryov, and I didn't include those kinds of guys, Rustam Kazimzanov, but I did include Philidor down here. I included Morphy, and then all of the guys from Steinitz down here, all the way up to Magnus Carlsen. You can see them when they're crowned world champion. They get that wreath on them. So in the past few days, we've taken a look at Steinitz. We've taken a look at Lasker. And today we're going to take a look at Jose Raul Capablanca. There he is, Jose Raul Capablanca, Cuban Grandmaster and World Chess Champion, the third Linear World Chess Championship. You can see him up in the top left corner playing against Emanuel Lasker. Vamp was the world champion in 2000 BC. Wow, well, he must have brought chess back in time, because chess was really only created in about, probably 600 or 800, wasn't it? Right? It was a spin-off of the Indian game Shatranj, or Chaturanga. But yes, that would be, I suppose he would be the world champion back then. So here's the legend of Jose Raul Capablanca. The story was that Capablanca used to watch his father play. He was a club level player, let's say. And he used to watch his father play, and his father wouldn't let him play. One day, Capablanca, at the age of 5, pointed out a move to his father and said that he had made a mistake. It was correct. This is just the legend. I don't know if this story is true or not. This is the legend. So his father said, "Oh yeah? Well, perhaps you'd like to play me a game of chess." Capablanca played him at full strength and beat his father in the very first game of chess he ever played at the age of 5. Whether that story is true or an exaggeration, or his father let him win, we don't know those stories yet. But what we do know is that Capablanca was one of, if not the greatest, natural chess geniuses who ever lived. At the age of 12, a couple of days before his 13th birthday, he completed a match versus the Cuban champion and beat him 4-3 with some draws. So he would have been the strongest player in Cuba at the age of 12. He eventually went on to win a series of top international tournaments, and after a number of attempts to try to get a match against Emanuel Lasker, in those days there was no FIDE, so you could dodge the strongest players in the world, and that was common practice, unfortunately. Even Capablanca himself would do that later against Alekhine. But at one point in time, I believe it was 1921, that finally, shortly after the war, that Capablanca was able to secure the match against Emanuel Lasker, which he won very cleanly with 4 wins, 0 losses, and a series of draws before Emanuel Lasker conceded the match and resigned. And he would be the world champion, I believe, for 6 years or something like that. Capablanca was a good-looking guy. He was popular with the ladies, very intelligent, charismatic, and he liked to have some drinks and hang out with the women. And so when he played against Alexander Alekhine, who was an incredibly deep calculator, maybe the deepest calculator in the history of the world. And I think that Capablanca thought it was going to be easy. Alekhine had never beaten Capablanca, much like Fischer had never beaten Spassky. Before their world championship match in 1972, Alekhine had never beaten Capablanca. So I don't think he prepared very well, and I don't think he thought it was going to be difficult. And he went in there and he promptly lost the world championship to Alexander Alekhine. At one point in time, he developed high blood pressure, kind of got out of tournament play, made an attempt to come back. One time he played the Avro tournament in 1938, had some mediocre results, pretty good, but not great, and then died at the age of 53. But there was a stretch of time. If you guys are aware of recent chess news, you might know that Liren Ding, Chinese grandmaster, recently went on a stretch of 100 games at the highest level against the world's greatest players, including Magnus Carlsen, without having a single solitary loss for 100 consecutive games of full-level chess. It was an unheard of streak. I believe it's a record at top international play. This took place over a year, maybe a couple of years for Liren Ding. Jose Raul Capablanca once went 8 years playing the world's greatest players, Lasker, Alekhine, Sultan Khan, all the greatest players of that era, Frank Marshall, and did not lose a single game for 8 years. Just think of that. This is how powerful he was. He was a very subtle player, although he could play brilliant tactics. His strength was his end game. Capablanca's games are virtually perfect. They are virtually without blemish or error, and even if you stick them into a computer today, they are virtually blemishless. He is one of the most technically perfect chess players who ever lived. And he was also an extremely fast player. So that is your number 3 world champion, linear champion ever, There's the man himself. Whoops. There's the man himself. Jose Raul Capablanca, 3rd World Chess Champion. Calculated wants to see some novelties. We're going to see some. Don't worry about it, Calculated. We'll get there. Capablanca wrote a book of 50 ways to do it. Shwobi coming in with some bits. Thank you, Shwobi. Isn't that kind of you? I don't have the tip jar out right now because I wanted to show more of the background and stuff. So I buried those for a few days. But I really appreciate that, Shwobi. It was very kind of you. Thank you so much for the support. Has my workload picked up since the World Championship has started? I mean, I don't know if the workload has picked up. You mean like lessons-wise and stuff? It's about the same, Blaze. It's about the same, and to be honest, my streamer numbers are down. So if there's anybody who wants to tell your friends or host me or raid me or anything like that, when I do these coverage of the World Championships and stuff, I'd really appreciate that because my numbers are not going to get any better doing this, analyzing these boring-ass games. Rare Twitch says, stretch the review, please. Bertrout, Tour facial hair is growing fast. Hope you're not turning into a lycanthrope. Yeah, I was going to shave before this stream, but like normal, everything takes so long. Like that collage took me almost 45 minutes to make. To put this all together, I had to find every one of these pictures and collage them all together so that covered the whole background. Take a snapshot, cut it, and paste it. So it was quite a bit of work just doing that. And then, of course, my cat gets hungry, and then I have to eat a meal because I'm going to be on for 2-3 hours. Going to go hungry, got to make a coffee. You know, then the phone rings. You guys know how life is. Give me a lesson and tell you you're pretty? No, I don't think so, Will Wolf. I really can't do that. I mean, I haven't even seen a picture of you. I don't know if you're pretty. I'm not going to lie to the people. I'm not going to lie to the people like that, Will Wolf. All right, let's get back into this game. 18, Queen F3. Bishop takes Bishop. Queen takes F6. But probably a little bit more accurate than Queen takes Bishop here. With Black still having a Bishop and a Rook on the board, or a Bishop and a Queen on the board and 2 Rooks, it's probably not a good idea. You've lost your white squared Bishop. You don't have very good defenses around your king side, so you better take advantage while you can and take that pawn. So both sides are going to end up with double pawns. Then comes the move B4, so white's not going to ever get that chance anymore. Rook E to D1. These positions, folks, are a dead stinking draw. A dead draw. This is move 21, and in a normal game, I would expect to draw here already. But because they're not allowed to draw before move 30, as per the tournament conditions, they will continue to play for a little while longer. Only this time, Magnus is not going to go for anything. Pawn takes and pawn takes. King to G2. I mean, what is Black going to play here? Or like to A4? I mean, there's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing here. The Rook's just going to come over, dead draw. Rook to C1. Going to try to hit on this backwards C-pawn. The 2-pawn advantage for white has been completely neutralized. There's just double pawns now, so there's no way for him to bully around like this. I mean, he does have a 5-on-4 pawn majority, so maybe he could play something like F4 or something. I don't know. But there's nothing here, guys. There's nothing here. King to G7. Bishop back to E1. The Rook's going to come over to defend that pawn. Rook comes up. Rook to A4. Doesn't do anything. The Bishop's already on that square. King to F3. H5. I would have expected H4 here. A little bit surprised I didn't play H4. It actually suggests G4. What happens on H4? Dead draw still. It's all the same. It's just a matter of technique here. King to E2. King G6. H3. F5. He's going to try to neutralize any aggression from white over here. This 3-on-2 seems a little bit weaker now because he doesn't have the F4 pawn push is not so strong anymore. So F3, bishop to E7, E4. Let's just turn on the computer since this is all just a dead draw. There's very little to analyze here, guys. I mean, basically, white is going to be tied down to the defense of this B pawn, and black is going to be tied down to the defense of the c-pawn. So these two weaknesses cancel each other out. So the only question is, can white in and of itself make some sort of an aggression with these pawns over here on the king side? And the answer is no. No, he can't. He's trying. The bishop comes here. He's still trying to get f4 in. So bishop to d6, a nice little move, attacking this pawn, this f4 square. Rook's going to double, and basically he's conceding a draw here. This is move 34, so they've gone a little bit past move 30. Basically, this pawn's going to drop, this pawn's going to drop, and white's never going to be able to go too far from the defense of the b pawn. So black will be tied down to the defense. White will be tied down to preventing that pawn from going any further. These pawns are not going to be able to go through on their own. The king is in the right place, so is the white king. Dead draw. Absolutely dead draw. So that was your game from today. I'm not going to lie to you and say it was super exciting. I don't think there was ever going to be any excitement. I think Magnus decided that an easy draw was going to be good enough for him. Hey, Swinkit is in the house. What's up? Why do they play these lines if they know it's a game? Or if they know it's a draw? Well, like I say, for one thing, because there's a tournament stipulation that they have to play 30 moves before they can offer a draw. So they're not allowed to offer a draw any sooner than that. So they have to at least play until move 30. An arbiter can call a draw, so I believe that if it's a situation, like I was asking this question yesterday, what happens if a situation takes place where your opponent plays a move where you have two choices, either you're losing or you take a perpetual check? Now, you might be in a worse position. So normally a perpetual check would be really nice. But if it was before move 30, if you're not allowed to offer a draw before move 30, would you not be allowed to play the perpetual and be forced to play the bad line? Like, could your opponent use that as a strategy to try to force you in between those two choices? But apparently the arbiter can call a draw, so in that situation, I believe, faced with either losing the game or playing a perpetual, that the arbiter would just call a draw anyways. But it's an interesting question as to what would actually happen if that took place. But Swinkit, I think that's the reason why they're playing the game, like at this point in time. To be honest, I slept through it. I mean, I slept through the first hour of it as well, Swinkita. So you're not alone. I was comfortable to come into it a little bit later and see if it was an interesting game. And unfortunately, it wasn't. But these things happen, guys, as we put on Nightbot for a little bit. Let's see what we got for Nightbot here. Let's put on the Auto DJ. So that is your World Championship review from Game 4, November 13th, 2018. We haven't seen the kind of openings we were expecting. We haven't seen the Petrovs. You know, we've seen a pair of Rosalimos, a Queen's Gambit declined, and a sort of an English variation. So I don't know what we're going to see in the next game. I'm going to guess that Carlsen is going to continue to play safely. Will we see a Rosalimo again? I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure we're going to see a third Rosalimo, but we might. What I would expect is that Carlsen is going to play another boring-ass game in Game 5, try to draw easily, and then I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a rest day after that. Then he's going to get 2 consecutive whites in a row, Game 6 and Game 7, because halfway through the tournament, they flop over. So it went Carlsen with black, white, black, white, black, white. Then they're going to flip it, and in Game 7, he will get his second consecutive white. Game 8, black, white, black, white, black. So he will finish and start the match with the black pieces. But in the middle, as a compensation, he will get 2 whites in a row. I believe the rest day followed by 2 whites in a row is where Magnus is going to try to strike. That, I think, is where you're going to see his most aggressive play. I think he's going to take the games as deep as he can, try to draw Fabi out, try to make him tired, and see if he can develop a winning position in one of those 2 games. If he can't, I think he's going to go back into draw mode. because then that'll be 7 games